Hello, this is Susan Smith Nash, and I just want to take a moment to help you get through the struggles of writing a research paper. So I put together a research paper survival guide. So this allows you to structure your paper and help you get started if you're feeling really stuck. So first of all, let's start with an introduction. So in your introduction, be sure to include a primary thesis, your research problem, its importance, and then three major sections of your investigation, the solution, findings, and recommendation. So why would you say you'd have all of those in the introduction? Well, it helps you guide, and it's not really the same as an abstract, but basically it helps you engage your reader and also give them an idea of what type of milestones to be looking for. And as you put together your introduction, you'll basically have your outline first. And remember to use your outline and use those points as headings in your paper. So you want to keep your reader with you. In your introduction, be sure to talk about why on earth your reader would be interested in your work. What's most vital? What matters? And then second, in your second section, have definition of key terms and concepts. So in this section, you will basically include the concepts that are absolutely vital for understanding your paper. I mean, be careful, it doesn't have to be every single key term. It's not a glossary, but it's a tool to help your readers basically ground themselves and get further into understanding what your paper is about. So then also, as you decide which things to include, you might want to also take a look at the terms that might be used in everyday life, but have a specific meaning within your paper. And so make sure that that is clarified. And then as you're thinking about it, be sure to include in-text citations. If you're doing an in-text citation, make sure that it's like the author, comma, year, or if you're actually quoting, include the page number. So here's your main research problem. So after you finish the background and context, you'll restate your main research problem, and it's basically an illustrative, you can include an illustrative scene or scenario. Make sure that your main research problem is original. If it's a synthesis that you're doing a kind of a lit review, basically state very clearly the limitations of your literature review. So for example, if you're talking about coronavirus, you don't want to just say coronavirus and that's it. Basically limit it. So maybe you could look at the role of mayors, in leadership of mayors in battling COVID-19. And then you could have some examples, or the role of mayors in New York State, for example, or in Texas, or California, or Oklahoma, for example. So if you're conducting an experiment or field studies, you'll need to put your research method also in your main research problem. So in your history research on this topic, this is essentially a lit review. And if your paper is essentially a lit review, this is what you'll have. And what you'll say is what others have said about this. And essentially say it's a lit review and have your literature review divided into categories. So what others have said, category 1, 2, or 3, or chronology of research. Now, if it's on something so topical and new, like the response of mayors in New York to COVID-19, there may not be too much on this, except you might be able to go into, say, Science Direct and look up the response of local leadership in China. Say, for example, governors or uh, basically local cities where they barricaded off their, basically self-quarantined, blocked traffic in. Anyway, so quite interesting. So in your evidence section, in this area, this is basically the body of your paper. So I call it the evidence, but it's really your body of your paper. So, for example, if we're talking about the responses of mayors in Oklahoma to the COVID-19, you could say, okay, Norman, Oklahoma, and Mayor Bria Clark was the first one to be really proactive and do a shelter in place and do as much stay at home as possible. Then the mayors of Oklahoma City and of Tulsa followed suit. You could also include what the governor did. Was it same or different? What were their responses? And if you have the statistics, you probably will need to cite reliable news sources, not a news feed, but try to go back to the first. And also, as you put down the statistics, say for example, if you're using Worldometer for your statistics, be sure to go into the state and click on the source, and you'll find that. And sometimes there are multiple sources. For example, in Louisiana, kind of a hot spot, you'll notice several sources. So be sure to cite carefully and also go back to as far back as you can to the original source. Original sources are usually best to say the state Department of Health for at least the mortality rates. And don't cite Worldometer, because that is basically the same as a tertiary site. That's a nice portal. It's like Wikipedia. It's good, but it may contain inaccuracies. So in your expanded evidence, you'll have more details. So in this case, as you go into each of the categories and add more, so for example, if you say Mayor of Norman, Bria Clark, did this or this or this, and then say, on this date she did this in response to this, and this date she did this in response to that. And then if there are any controversies, make sure to put that there. And if there's any frustration expressed with, say, other, with like basically other government officials, mention that too. So one of the most important and valuable parts of your research your research paper will have to do with evaluating controversies. So discuss the issues, present new ways of looking at the primary thesis, make sure this is original. But then, as you look at, say, for example, the leadership of mayors, be sure to undermine or question the underlying assumptions. So say, okay, this was done, and this was the reason. What are some of the controversial issues? And also, what are some of the unintended consequences of that decision or that act? So finally, in your conclusion, what is the goal of your conclusion? If it is to look at the various reasons for mayoral decisions in controlling COVID-19, you could say, okay, the goal of this is to find an ideal way to effect policy that is in absolutely uncharted territory. What can leaders do? And discuss how to do that. And then insights, recommendations, probable issues vis-a-vis the future. So this can include a vision of the future, an illustrative scenario. So in the case of COVID-19, it's terrifying scenario, but talk about the pros and cons of different activities and the desired outcomes, and then thinking about other things. For example, would the mayor start issuing directions of best ways to treat yourself at home if you show symptoms? What are the things that you really need to have? How to take care of yourself? and how to minimize or if there's any way to ameliorate the progress of the disease when it's in its first stages, find out how. Anyway, and I know there's like building the immune system, but is there anything else? I mean, is there a way to like minimize viral load, um, give your body a break in fighting off the thing? What can we do? Anyway, hope this has been helpful, and we'll talk soon. Please email me if you have any questions.